Okay, thanks everyone for joining. To keep everyone's time tight, we're going to get started here today. Thank you very much for joining the Alteryx and Tableau Building a Culture of Analytics event, co-hosted with Alteryx and Newpop. Kathleen or Sophie, can you just confirm the sound is clear and good?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Didn't want to be talking into a white space by myself there. So again, thank you very much everyone for joining. I'm going to get started. I am going to record today's session, and I will send out the recording after for any if you watch or whatnot. So my name is Liam Hay. I am an Alteryx account executive based out of Canada. And then also today from Newpop, I have Sophie Harrison, who's a senior account manager, and Kathleen Songen, who is the data analytics lead. Both will be speaking shortly here. But again, thank you very much for joining. We are going to try and leave a few minutes at the end for any questions. If you have something pressing in the middle that you would like to ask, just put it in the Q&A chat, or you can message myself or Sophie independently. Kathleen will be going through the demo, so probably best to reach out to one of us, and I can monitor the chat. But to kick things off and get started, I just wanted to show you, to give some light to exactly what Alteryx is and what we're focused on in the marketplace. So, when we look out into the kind of ecosphere and what we are trying to accomplish, we realize that data is one of the most important things in the world right now. And there's so much of it, and there's such a requirement from organizations to understand their data, be able to manipulate their data, and do more with it. So what we're really focused on is data automation and being able to derive more insights from your data and move yourselves up the analytics curve. So today's event is obviously we're going to focus on Alteryx, and we're also going to focus on Tableau. This is a visualization engine that comes alongside of Alteryx. So as I said, when we look at the ecosphere, we see a number of things that's going on. Sorry if it's cutting out. If anyone has issues with it, just let me know, and I can fix that. But so as I said, so 94% of organizations use multiple sources for their data, and then 64% analysts need 5 or more different data sources. So with a platform like Alteryx, the ability to bring data sources into one place and manipulate and use the data there is very powerful. And then to the last point there, 20% of analytics shared via email goes to show the value of a platform like Tableau. Sorry, folks, just trying to fix the microphone here, having some notes that it's not working. Kathleen or Sophie, does that sound better?
That is more clear, yeah. You were. It's almost as if you were moving close and far from the microphone before.
Okay. If there's any issues, I can stop talking. We can hand it over to you, Sophie. But if that's clear, then I'll keep going. My apologies. So yeah, I'll just continue there. Kathleen, if you can move to the next slide there so we can keep on time. So again, another area that we see is that right now in the industry, you see the need for people to be able to do more with their data, understand their data, and move along the move along the analytics curve better. So as we say, today's data process automation user is tomorrow's data citizen, data science. So as we enable those who are comfortable in Excel, SQL, Access to become more comfortable with their data, derive more insights and more power with a platform like Alteryx, we see them moving into the citizen data sciences, which is incredibly important as companies move up their analytics capabilities and curves. So that's just a little bit about Alteryx and what we see in the industry. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sophie to talk a little bit about Newpop and some of the work that they're doing alongside Alteryx. Sophie?
Perfect. Thanks, Liam. So as Liam mentioned, my name is Sophie Harrison with Newpop Analytics. I'm a senior account manager with Newpop, and I'm here today just to give you a little bit of an overview of Newpop Analytics. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Newpop Analytics, we are an end-to-end analytics provider. We do software licensing, implementation services, strategic consulting, mentoring, and training for all aspects of analytics. So that's everything from analytics strategy to data warehouse development to cloud architecture to data engineering, business intelligence development, and data science. As an Alteryx partner, we're here to support both people who are considering Alteryx as well as existing clients. If you're using Alteryx on a trial basis, our job is to really make sure that you have the support that you need through a guided trial to help solve the use case you want to take on and answer any questions that you might have about the tool or the licensing format. So after this webinar, if you're on a trial of Alteryx, we're happy to help you get it extended to 30 days. Or if you don't currently have a trial, we can arrange to get that set up as well. We're here to support you through the trial period. And with existing clients, we can provide anything from best practice advice to implementation services, to staff augmentation, training, and mentoring. And as well, we're a Tableau Gold partner. And we really have witnessed firsthand about how these two tools, Alteryx and Tableau, fit hand in hand. So at this point, I'm going to pass it off to Kathleen, who is our data analytics lead, so she can really show you how the relationship between these two solutions shines.
Thanks, Sophie and Liam. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. This is Kathleen Songen speaking. I'm a data analytics lead with Newpop Analytics, and I work a lot with Alteryx and Tableau. So the goal today is just to kind of give you information about how we could leverage Alteryx, use it within Tableau, how we could prepare our data properly, and just show how they both harmoniously work really well together. The session will be recorded, so after, if anybody has any questions on how to build this workflow or kind of why we're doing it, I'd be happy to answer any questions. In addition, during this webinar, we also have someone monitoring the chat and the Q&A, so maybe if I do something and you have a question on it, just put it in the chat. If I could see it, I may address it to everybody, but if I don't, I will try to get to it to the end. So I'll try to kind of go through as much information as possible and then leave some additional time at the end for any questions. So what I like to do is I like to keep it kind of informal, and I find the best way in order to see these webinars is rather than just show you a finished product like you may see on the screen, which is what we're going to build, I want us to build it together so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. Today's use case is going to be about survey responses, survey queries, and matching them up with a variety of question templates. And we're going to prepare this specifically for an analysis in Tableau Desktop. So if you're unfamiliar with Alteryx or you're unfamiliar with Tableau, I will go through some of the kind of basic introductions of them. And if you are already familiar with the tools, every single time I do a webinar, I like to use a tool that maybe isn't in your general roster or that's a little bit more complex, just so you could see if maybe you could bring it into your day-to-day. So just to get started, a little bit about Alteryx. What I like to point everybody first to is obviously the Alteryx Designer, which we'll be working in, but also the Alteryx Community. This is a really good place, especially if you're a starter in Alteryx or if you've already been using it for a little bit. This is where people go to ask questions and get questions answered. You'll have somebody like me kind of going around on the site, and if somebody has a question, hopefully answer it. In addition, sometimes if you post a workflow maybe that you're having trouble with, people will post you with the exact right solution, which is super helpful. Honestly, there's a lot of community web pages for every tool, but this one's pretty good. There's weekly challenges if you want to kind of challenge what you're doing, and you can also look into a variety of different use cases that may suit your organization or your needs. In addition, if you want to kind of start learning Alteryx yourself, we offer a lot of deep dive classes in order to get you prepared for the certifications. And in addition, there is a lot of really good interactive lessons and videos on the Alteryx community. The one that I always point out to everybody to do, especially the Alteryx for Excel users, I know we're kind of trying to get away from that. So if there's something that you're kind of already doing, I see this a lot with survey data, for example. A lot of information's kind of coming through with Excel. So we want to know kind of how we could leverage a tool like Alteryx instead in order to make it a lot more clear and easier to use. In addition, if you are using Alteryx and you're just kind of starting your connection with Alteryx to Tableau, Alteryx has a variety of different starter kits. For example, the Alteryx and Tableau starter kit is a free download. It kind of attaches to your version of Alteryx, and it'll have a lot of examples of how to prepare data and connect it with Tableau. And this goes from data preparation, forecasting, spatial analysis, and it just really helps you leverage all the tools that are available with Alteryx and Tableau as well. So let's jump in and let's start building our visualization by taking a look at the data that we're trying to build and the end result. So like I mentioned, I want to bring in a bunch of survey data, and I essentially want it to get into a format in order to build a report. We're going to take Superstore data from orders from the Superstore. So this is just a generic data set, but you could picture your own data set being inside. And we're actually going to take what's a standard survey input format and transform it into something that's easy to visualize, like you see on the screen. And we're also going to directly attach the workflow with the data to the Tableau workbook, so we don't have to go in and rebuild and recreate everything from scratch in order to create this automation. This is really good for any kind of ordering. In academia, a lot of surveys, for example, kind of going through, and this can update dynamically with the information that you put into the system. So starting off with Alteryx, the Alteryx Designer tool, working with version 2020 here. So if you have an older version, it may look a little bit different than mine, but most of the buttons are in similar places. You have your standard tools at the top of the screen in order to save and open workflows. A workflow is a combination of tools that are used in order to transform your data. These tools are separated in these tabs or palettes that are located near the top of the Alteryx Designer. And each palette is going to have a little bit of a theme as to what you could do with the tools inside. For example, in my in and out palette, I have the ability to input data and output data. So that kind of makes sense as to what the title is. Next, we'll be using a little bit of our preparation palette. These tools are used to prepare your data, whether that be creating a formula, filtering unnecessary data, or deselecting fields and rows we don't need. In addition, we can bring in two separate data sources by joining them together, blending, even creating a fuzzy match. Fuzzy match is also super useful, especially when we're working with survey data, because maybe you're looking at kind of similar wording or words and you want to kind of find where if there's any combining fields. Then we're also going to talk a little bit about the parse palette. We're actually going to use the regular expression tool today, which a lot of people are afraid of, me included, because the regular expression language can be very tricky. So if this is your first time seeing it, that will make me very happy. Just so you could kind of see how it could really help you with a complicated data set like survey data. We're also going to transform our data in order to put in the proper format so it's easy to use in Tableau. I'm going to be saying Alteryx and Tableau a lot, and we always have to keep the end product in mind when we're doing data transformations. In our case, we want to make sure that our fields are going to be input into Tableau Desktop in a way that's readable and a way for somebody in order to make a workbook or a dashboard out of. In order for them to make that clean, proper report, we got to think of what types of fields we want to incorporate into our workbook and have a plan. A good idea is to kind of sketch out what you want and determine what types of fields you want to input. Then we have a variety of other tools. If you're working in a database, we have in-database tools, a variety of really great reporting tools that are also available in Alteryx, spatial data investigation, and then we have the whole Alteryx predictive suite, which is also available to download with your version of Alteryx. And we have tons of webinars and workshops and walkthroughs. So if anybody has questions about these individual tools, you'll be able to see them there. In addition, I wanted to point out the Tableau palette. See how we just have a couple of tools, the output to Tableau workbook, Polygon for Tableau. These tools automatically come with that Alteryx and Tableau starter kit that I mentioned. And in addition, under our help menu where we have sample workflows, once you download the Tableau starter kit, this is where you're going to be finding examples of how Alteryx and Tableau can connect together, along with some walkthrough and step-by-step guided tours similar to the one we're going to do today. Some other features available in Alteryx if you don't have the newer version with 2020. I have this little global icon at the top of my screen, and that's just used to change the language on the fly. So if you're kind of for example, us here, we're in Canada, so we want to switch between English and French. It's super useful. And I'll talk about some of the other new features as we go through this workflow. So first things first, I want to import some data. So naturally, I'm going to go to the in and out palette and bring in my input data tool. The configuration palette, which is the palette on the left-hand side, is going to change based on what tool you bring into the view, because it's going to determine how that tool is going to work. So in my case, I want to input a data set, and in this case, I want to input a file. I could drag the file that I need under my file connections, or I could take a look at all the different types of data sources that are available. So for example, if you're connecting to a JSON file, an Excel file, even a zip, or spatial, you can do that all through here. In addition, you can bring in a variety of data sources or information from the gallery. With data sources, if you have any ODBC connection, you're connecting to SQL, Salesforce, Snowflake, all the information, all the connection information rather, is available. We are just going to stick to some flat files, so some Excel files. So I'm going to go to Select File, navigate to my Alteryx Tableau webinar, and I'm going to bring in these survey responses. Now, one of the other new features is when you bring in an Excel sheet, as always, you're able to choose which particular sheet you want to bring in. But in addition, you can also select a range of rows. So let's say you have a lot of nulls at the end of your survey data and you only want to bring in columns A to G. You could do so by specifying before the data comes into Alteryx. The reason that this is very useful is all our workbooks and the interactive portions on our workbooks are going to react well if you have data that performs well, meaning that you bring in the cleanest data possible. So we don't want to bring in more information that we don't need. Luckily for us, this already contains everything we need, so I'm just going to go ahead and click OK and bring in my survey data that's on the left-hand side. I want to do a quick analysis of my data to make sure that the data quality is good. So I'm going to do that with my in and out palette, bringing in my browse tool and clicking Run, which is located at the right-hand side. For those of you who are familiar with Alteryx, you always want to click Run. You always want to add a browse tool on data. The reason being is this is always going to check on the quality of your data, meaning letting you know if there's any nulls, any blank spaces, any asterisks or things in front or behind your data that you're really not interested in. In addition, the browse tool has been updated, as you may see on the left-hand side. So if I want to do a further investigation, for example, into age, I can select age and I can see that my biggest age range in people that responded already are from 25 to 34, and that's about 26.22% of my data. So I've already gotten a little bit of analysis with my data without even adding anything. This is just from strictly looking at the data. In addition, I could see if there's any nulls, they're not okay, so any spaces, or if there's any empty fields as well. This data looks okay, and I can also see it on a preview, which is the bottom window. This is my results window. This also tells you what is happening in the workflow. As I could see, I have some survey information. The first question is about age and gender, any past purchases that have gone on, and then if these fields are recommended, value, quantity. I could see that I don't really have full questions here, but that's usually how the survey data comes in. It looks like I have a scaling system, maybe from 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, and my recommended is from 0 to 10. Then my last question for number 9 looks like I have a selection option. So one of my fields are selected or not selected, and I have to find a way to kind of draw out this information again so I can see it in Tableau. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to transform this data. So what I want to see in Tableau is I want to be able to see what these questions are. So what is this question about recommendation, value, quantity, and who described the brand? In terms of my first 2 questions about age, gender, and past purchase, this isn't a scale. This is just a selection for yes or no. So what age group are you in? Select female, male, or other, and how many times have you purchased? I want to leave these as is, but like I said, I want to have a list of my other questions because in my end report, I want to create a list of questions and I want to see how the respondents acted. With my other questions like gender and age and how often they purchased an item, I just want to do a count of that information. So I'm just going to leave it as is as individual fields. In Tableau, any individual field that you leave is going to come in as a field that you can analyze individually, and any that you group together, so in one column, you can group all at once. In order to do this, I'm going to jump to my transform palette, and I'm going to bring in my transpose tool. This tool is going to ask me which fields I want to group together. And if I take a look at the incoming data source for each survey ID, I want to see the age, the gender selected, and how many times they purchased. Then what I want beside that is I want a list of all the other questions that were asked. And beside that, I also want the corresponding values. If I go ahead and click run, this is going to run my tool. And I always have these buttons before and after a tool in Alteryx to see how the data's changed. So beforehand, I had 13 fields. And after I ran the transpose tool, I have 6. Now I see the survey ID, the age group, the gender, the past purchases, and now I have a list of those questions that I want to display in my workbook, from recommended all the way to what was selected in terms of branding. Now there's still a lot to clean up here, and I could do so by using any of my formula tools or regular expression tools. For example, let's take a look at this question number 9. It looks like I was able to choose stylish, trendy, or classic when the question was asking what describes this brand. Well, my other values for my answers are numerical, so 1 to 10 and then 1 to 5. But where it says selected under value, I want to replace this with the actual answer that the user gave, stylish, trendy, or classic. In order to do that, I'm going to bring in my regular expression. And the reason I want to bring in my regular expression tool instead of the text to columns, which you may know and love, is just because I want to show you how easy it is to or how you can leverage regular expression and text to columns. If you're unfamiliar with text to columns, all you have to do is find a delimiter that you want to split your data set on. So for example, let's say I wanted to see the word stylish, trendy, and classic. I can just choose that the underscore is what I want to split on, and I could split out stylish, trendy, and classic. In this case, I don't want to have an additional row or an additional column for each underscore that's in my data set. Instead, I really just want to focus in on these last 3 options to determine if they're selected or not. The beauty of the regular expression tool is it's kind of like its own language, and it is going to be able to pinpoint what you want in a complicated string and only take out the necessary information. In this case, I'm going to take a look at my name field, and I'm going to use this regular expression that even to me looks like nonsense. There is great tools online in order to use regular expression, and I am by no means an expert. What I'm essentially trying to do here is I want to split up my regular expression into 2 groups. This first section, 9, describes brand, etc. I don't want to include it all. I don't care to split that up because I'm just going to leave that as part of the question and as is. What I do want to split up is this stylish, trendy, and classic section. So what this first part of the regular expression is telling me is not to include that first split, but look for a couple of characters until I see an underscore. After I see an underscore, then I want to parse out the rest of the information. In this case, I want to parse out those words, stylish, trendy, and classic. In addition, with regular expression, you can replace, tokenize, match, or parse. And in my case, I want to parse the data. And by parsing it, you could see that I only have one output based on the expression. That's that period and the asterisk, because again, I use that question mark in order to ignore the first half. After I run this data set, it looks like it takes the last underscore that's available in any of my names and only outputs the end. So for example, now I have that stylish, trendy, and classic in my question that asks me to describe brand. In addition, what I want to do is I want to replace the value selected with this regular expression output. So I'm just going to do that by using my trusty formula tool. Now with the formula tool, you can stack formulas on top of each other, and you could do a variety of if statements and functions. If you're ever interested in the functions that are available in Alteryx, if you take a look at the FX tool, you can see that I have a list for finance, file, math, spatial, specialized, etc. And you can even save your own calculations as well. I'm just going to use an if, and I'm going to use that on the value. So I'm going to take a look at that value row. And if it says selected, I want to replace it with whatever was in my regular expression. So I'm going to choose that value, and I'm going to say if it says selected, then I want to replace it with that regular expression output, or else I just want to leave it as is because I still want those numerical values there. Now under my value, I have everything that I'm going to need in my workbook. In addition, I can also use regular expression in the formula tool. So for this name, I don't want to have any of the information for stylish, trendy, and classic. I just want the name of the question, which is a question about describing brand. I'm going to use regular expression again, but this time I'm going to use a regular expression replace function. What this function is going to do is it's going to take the name, it's going to find a pattern, and it's going to replace it with a different pattern. In this case, the pattern that I'm trying to match is if I ever have question 9 describes brand with an underscore and any variety of characters, that's what that period and then asterisk is. I want to make sure I'm going to replace that without getting that underscore and those additional characters. So I'm just going to replace that with 9 underscore describes brand. Now if I run it and take a look at how that looks, before it had that stylish, trendy, and classic, and after I have just the question about describing brand. Another thing that I want to do is I want to build on a field that I saw before. So for example, let's say I wanted to update the value column again. I am able to do that. So anytime that I see, for example, any of my numerical values, let's say I just wanted to pad it with a 0 in front, I can use the pad left function because it's just a little bit easier to read in a survey. It's better format for me to choose the value and add a 0 in front. In this case, I'm looking for 2 characters, and every time I don't have a 0 that's padded in front, it's going to add it. So I'll explain that one again. So for numbers, for example, 0 all the way to 9, or 1 to 9 in this case, if there's 2 characters, I want the 0 to be on the very left-hand side of those 2 characters, which is why it doesn't show up in my stylish, trendy, or not selected. Finally, I want to just add some more context to the gender. Right now, it just says M, F, and O, but I want to actually label these male, female, and other. So I'm just going to go ahead and do your classic if statement. So I'm going to say if the gender is equal to M, then male. Else if that one C is equal to F, then female. Else other. And it is important that we have everything represented in our data set. Now, of course, there's easier ways to do these if, then statements, etc. So you could do whichever way is comfortable for you. I just wanted to show a couple of different formulas that you could leverage with the tool in order to clean up data. I'll also show you how to do a calculation in Tableau, so you can decide where to do it. However, we do recommend for performance that you do all your calculations outside of Tableau. For example, using Alteryx to do all your modeling calculations, so you just have the end set of data in Tableau in order to make your dashboards run as efficiently as possible. So let's give that a run and take a look at our data coming together. Now, I have a lot of fields, or some fields that were not selected. And I'm not interested in looking at the not selected data, so I'm just going to filter it out, pretend it didn't happen. I'm going to bring in my filter tool in order to do this. And generally, we would filter out based on some conditions. So equals something is greater than or less than. But in our case, we're going to take a value and we're actually going to say does not equal. So I want to see everything that does not equal not selected because I am not interested in the information that was not selected. Now with the filter tool, your data isn't lost. You don't only have, for example, true coming out of the end, you also have false. So that's the other good thing about the tool is if at any point you want to go back and let's say you wanted to include that data that was not selected, the data is not lost on the way. You still have all the information coming in at the beginning. And if you want to reunion or recombine your false or not selected information, you could always do so just by using the false at the side or just getting rid of this tool altogether and continuing on with your analysis. In addition, with the filter tool, you're able to see the formula tool again. So any of the formulas that were created previously, those functions, any of those saved expressions, you can also leverage them using the filter functionality. Finally, I just want to clean up some of these words and phrases. So we're going to use my favorite tool, the select tool. In addition, anytime you select a tool and you're curious as to what it does, if you select a tool, you see a little description of that tool, and beneath it, there's generally a hyperlink that goes to open an example. This is going to open an example of a variety of ways that the tool was used and a little description on how to use it. And if you're ever curious, you can also use the search toolbar that's located at the top of the screen. Now, back to it. I'm going to use my select tool, and the reason this is my favorite tool is that it's found in a variety of other tools. It is used in order to deselect fields that you don't want, change data types, change the size, rename, or add descriptions. I can see at the bottom, I have a regular expression, and a description's already automatically been named for me. It said that something was parsed from name. Well, sorry, but I don't want this in my data set. I don't want all this additional information because I've already gotten my answers in the value like I need. In addition, it might be confusing for the user to see 1B age. They don't know that's a question that's being asked. So I'm just going to change the name of this to age. For 1C gender, I'm just going to change that to gender. And then I'm just going to change it to past purchases. Finally, my name, I'm going to change to question. And the value is going to be the response. Now you can have a response, answer, however you want to display it in your report. Finally, what I want to do is I take a look at the string for the name, and these names are actually quite short, but I know the actual questions that I want to display in the workbook are a lot longer. So I'm also going to change the data type on name by clicking the drop-down where it says string, taking that VW string and increasing the size to 255 characters because I know the types of questions that are going to be asked. After I run this, I have it in a little bit of a more user-friendly format. In that, I have the survey ID, an age, gender, past purchases, the question, and the response. Now, this looks pretty good. However, this is not a real question. 7_shipping, 8_ in stock. I could probably guess what they were trying to ask and get the results based on that. But again, the whole point of this exercise is I want to put it in a report. And I want either the general public or someone, a VP or a manager, in order to read this information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in another data set, and that data set is going to have a key to match up for each of my questions based on their question ID. In order to bring in another data set, all you have to do is go back to your in and out palette, take another input tool, and drop it on the view. You can bring in input tools from different shapefiles, from different data sources, and combine them all in one canvas, which is this blank space that I'm building the workflow. Like I said, I'm just connecting to Excel files today, nothing really that exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my question template, bring in sheet 1, take my browse tool, and run again. If I take a look at my browse tool and my data, it looks like the ID of the question and also past purchases, value describes brand, has a long form associated with it. So that last question, how would you describe the brand? Select 1, stylish, trendy, or classic, are all under possible answers. In addition, this is also a really good way in order to determine the sentiment or scale of my analysis. For example, my first question is, how likely is it that you would recommend us? 0 being not at all and 10 being extremely likely. My next is, how would you rate the value of our products? 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. This is going to tell me that when somebody responds to a question, it's not all 1 out of 10. Imagine that I thought that all the questions were 1 out of 10, and all of a sudden my ratings are 4s and 5s. I would think I'm doing pretty bad, when in fact I'm actually not. So this is where it's a good idea in order to bring in the full-length question. Now, there's a couple of different ways to bring it in. I can just join them based on a key, so an ID. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to replace the question ID out of my select statement, and I'm just going to replace it with the long form question, because there is no sense for me to have a question ID in a report. Nobody's ever going to look at that question ID. Again, this is to be more visually pleasing, so they want to bring in the long form. In order to do that, I'm still going to bring in my join tool, but this time I'm going to use my find and replace. I have 2 inputs, 1 for finding and 1 for replacing. And the thing that I'm going to find within the field is my question. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking that question. Look at this data here. I'm taking the question and I'm going to replace it with the ID. So this question and the ID are going to be the same. This is going to be my matching field. And the thing that it's going to be replaced with is the long form question, which is this question field here. So I'm going to make sure that question is selected for finding within field, ID is selected for finding out of field. And then I'm going to replace that text with the long form question and select run. Now I have my survey ID, my age, my gender, past purchases, the long form question, and any corresponding response. Now I know this is good in order for me to bring into Tableau. This information I want to bring into Tableau because, again, I want to do an individual analysis on the questions as a whole. And I want to see an overall count of ages, gender, and past purchases. So now that my data is set up and ready to go, I'm going to talk about 3 different ways we can implement this into Tableau now. The first way is just to save it as a file and then import it into Tableau Desktop. So you can export your fields using the output data tool and just by dragging the output data tool and attaching it to the end. Some of the formats that you could save your output data tool are a hyper data extract or a .hyper file with Tableau Desktop. This is a kind of zipped up package snippet of your data that runs very fast and has really good performance metrics, worked with Tableau Desktop. I can save this hyper file to my local machine and then open it up with Tableau Desktop and run it from there. However, every single time you update your data source, you're going to have to make sure to run the Alteryx workflow and update the data and then publish it to your desktop and put it in the report that you need. You also have this Tableau data extract. This is if you're running versions of Tableau 10.5 and previous. Still an extract file, just has a little bit different capabilities than the hyper. In addition, you can also publish your data source directly to Tableau server. So if I use the help bar at the top right-hand side and bring in my publish to server, I'm actually able to take this data set out of Alteryx and publish it directly to my instance of Tableau Online or my server. All All I have to do is log on with my username and password. And I have to put in the appropriate URL. Now, if you're working with a server, your own server that's on-premise, you may be familiar with whatever your name is. In this case, I'm just using Tableau Online, which is Tableau's hosted version of server. So I'm just going to log on to their Tableau instance. I have a site called Newpop Analytics, and I'm going to go ahead and connect to it. After you've connected to it, you can specify a project name in order to publish this to. So for example, a default folder. I can change the name, for example, my customer analysis. And you could create, overwrite, or append data sources. So let's say you're constantly getting in new information from your surveys. And every time you run a workflow, there's going to be more information. You can append this information onto the Tableau server in order to view it. In addition, you can choose the data format, again, that hyper or that TDE, and you can also save that data source metadata wherever you want to. What's going to happen is after you run this, it's going to be published on Tableau into the server. Finally, what you could do is on Tableau, we have the option to output to a workbook. So what this does is it allows you to point to a workbook that already has the template of the data you're working with. So the first time around, you would connect your extract and you would connect the information, survey information in this format to the workbook. And then after, you could connect it to that template. This means that every time this runs, it is going to take my data and publish it to my Tableau server. And in addition, it's going to publish it to this workbook that I've already created. This workbook is in Tableau Desktop. And if you go to Tableau Desktop and I take a look at the data source section, this looks very familiar to the information that I just saw on Alteryx because this was directly connected to this desktop. I have the survey, I called it survey extract, so it's a survey extract. But essentially what it does is it brings in all my fields about surveys, past purchases, questions, responses, and also a field that's last updated. Here I also have an additional calculation, and I know it's a calculation because it doesn't have a blue field on top of it, meaning it's not part of my data source. So if I wanted to see information, for example, about average responses, I can take a look at all my fields that I created in Alteryx and how they were published in Tableau. I can now take information about age, gender, any past purchases, the questions that were asked, for in this case, I'm looking at questions 3 to 8, the survey IDs and responses. In addition, I created a calculated field that changed any of my values from being numeric to integers, and any of my verbal responses or my string responses like classic, stylish, and trendy, not to be included. So for example, I know that in the how likely were you to recommend us to a friend, my scale is between 1 and 10. Here I have some scores of 7.3, 7.5, and 7.4. And then I have how would you rate the value of our products. Here I know that my scale is between 1 and 5, so I'm averaging about 3.7, 3.8. A very common mistake is you could see that I have this average reference line that goes through all of my questions. But knowing that my questions from 4 to 8 are between 1 to 5 and question number 3 is between 1 to 10, this is making me seem like my average score is skewing in one direction to another. So what you could actually create filters here in Tableau as well. You can get rid of questions, for example, that you don't want to include and include them in another visualization. Now, when I take a look at my customer analysis, I can see that people would rate our products and overall how much they have purchased this information. In addition, I have a count of the average ages and how many people respond to these scores. I knew initially from looking at Alteryx that about 26% of my population was between 25 and the 34 age group, and I could also see that they were built like this as well. And I also have this donut chart here that shows me the percentages of females, males, and others in my Superstore analysis. Let's say that I wanted to build something. I can just simply do so by opening up a new sheet and taking the information I brought in from Alteryx and building a workbook out of it. Let's say I wanted to see how many people said that the Superstore was stylish, classic, or trendy. I can make sure to only leave in these 3 responses and bring that response onto my view. I have a number of records, which tells me how many people decided to respond. And I also have those surveys IDs. I can do a count of the survey IDs so I know how many people responded in each setting. Now I could see that 434 people responded to classic, 424 respond to stylish, and 445 responded to trendy. I can do different things like sorting my visualizations, and I can even integrate visualizations into each other. So for example, let's say I wanted to take a look at my different age groups, and I wanted to see which one, or particular genders, and I wanted to see which one of those deemed either stylish, classic, or trendy. I can do things like change color, size, labels, and angles in Tableau, and I could even import different visualizations. So for example, I can insert that sheet that I just created that talked about the stylish or trendy capabilities. Now I can see within each section who thinks I have trendy, classic, and stylish. It looks like males generally go for classic, when females say trendy, and others are responding trendy as well. A lot of different insights that I could start building here. And once your insights are done, you can always publish them to Tableau Server. This is going to go to the same place that I published my worksheet, or that I published the actual data source before into customer analysis. Oops, I want to overwrite it, so I'm going to go yes. And I just wanted to show you how this looked like in Tableau Server and how you could just connect to that data that we brought in from Alteryx. Now, once I share this with my organization, they can interact with it, they can ask questions about it, they can see any of the features that are available to me, including filtering, hovering over, and seeing how my trends change over time. In addition, if I wanted to see any customer analysis information or Alteryx output for Tableau that was created, I can do so by taking a look at the data source that was created and bringing them into my view. So that's how we would get from an analysis, just looking at generic survey data and pushing it in a way that could be uploaded to the Tableau server, right into the Tableau desktop, and also built in a report. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them either in the Q&A and the chat. And if anybody's interested more in how to make like a survey dashboard or have something that looks like this, I'll also be happy to talk to that.
Kathleen, looks like we have a question from someone. Can you export to Power BI the same way?
Absolutely. So we also
that slide out there.
Yes, we also have a Alteryx and Power BI workshop coming up. We're going to have a different use case, and we are going to be outputting our use case into Power BI a similar way.
We have a question, Kathleen. I'm having trouble publishing Tableau data source with predefined meta info, TDS file.
Okay, so if you want to publish the TDS file from Alteryx into your Tableau server, I do recommend that you do that from Tableau Desktop. And any of the metadata changes, you can also automate that. So I don't have like a quick example of it, but reach out to us and I'll be able to to help you with that. And then somebody's asking also about who they could talk to in order to extend their trial version of Alteryx. So that's going to be Sophie or Liam on the team. You'll be able to talk to them. And I'm sure they'll be able to send you their information.
And then there's just a question. Do you mind speaking about Alteryx Gallery for a minute?
Yeah, so the Alteryx Gallery is kind of like Alteryx's server. Let's see if I have it here. So this workflow, for example, let's say that I wanted to put it on a schedule. A really good idea for me would be to publish this to the Alteryx Gallery. So when you save as, and you could save to your public or private gallery that's kind of linked to your email, you'll be able to have others be able to interact with it. Another way that the Alteryx Gallery is very useful is you can create things like macros and applications, and you can publish those to the gallery. So let's say people were only interested in 1 or 2 questions about the survey. They only wanted to see how people describe the trend, or they only wanted to see the age range. You can actually use Alteryx's interface and macro tools in order to put user prompts, click run, and then display that report that you want based on those fields. So we also have a lot of cool workshops on that as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Kathleen. And then, do you mind going over the transpose tool a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So the transpose tool is actually super fun. So they work hand in hand, the transform and the transpose, I said transform as well. So the transpose and the cross-tab tool work hand in hand. So the one is going to take any column headers that you have. So for example, all the questions that I'm looking at, and it's going to flip it and it's going to turn this row into a column. Whatever your key columns are, you can think of as things that don't change or stay static. So if you just want a survey ID, the age, the gender, the past purchases, these will stay as individual fields. That's what you check mark here. Then what the data column is going to do is it's going to take everything you've selected. It's going to put that in one column, and it's going to take any of the values that were originally found underneath, so all these numbers and then the selected, non-selected information, and it's going to put it in another column called values. If you want to completely flip a data set, so for example, let's say you wanted survey, age, gender, past purchases, recommended, etc., kind of flipped 90 degrees, you would use this in conjunction with the crosstab tool, in that you would just take your data, flip it one way, and then flip it the other way.
Perfect. I think we've got 2 more questions here. Can you talk about scheduling the Alteryx workflow?
Yeah, so there's a couple of options. If you have Alteryx Server, you can create schedules based on it, and you can also have the Alteryx Scheduler, which is an additional purchase. So kind of similar if you're familiar with Tableau, with creating a schedule, refreshing your data, you can just say, let's say you have new survey information coming in every Monday at 9 a.m. You would just click on this little scheduling button that's located beside the run button at the top. I don't have the scheduler on here, but you would connect to your gallery or controller, click OK, and then you would use it there.
Perfect. And a couple more here coming. How do we publish dashboards or reports in Tableau? Is it in Tableau only, or can be published in Excel or PDF as well?
Yeah, so if you're publishing a Tableau dashboard, like I have on the screen, then you need to have Tableau Desktop in order to do so. There are a variety of tools like Alteryx that will enable you to publish the data source onto the Tableau server. And then once you're in the Tableau server, you can actually connect to that data and build your visualizations right there on the web, essentially bypassing the Tableau Desktop. So pretty much everything that I built out here, you can do the same thing on the web by just immediately publishing your Alteryx dataset onto Tableau server.
Okay, thank you. I think last question here that I've seen roll in. Can you show a quick example of a crosstab?
Yeah, for sure. So let's take the information that we have here, like our genders, and let's say we wanted to take that and we wanted to just have a header with each one. If I take my crosstab tool and connect it to my survey data, the difference here is it's going to ask you to specify which data you want to group together. So let's say I want to keep my survey ID, which one you may want to make a column header. So let's say it's going to be my gender here, and then what values you want to put inside. So I want to see a list of all my survey IDs, and then I want to see each individual gender as column headings. And then let's say I wanted to see what the recommendation was. And then I'm going to take those values. Let's just put an average there. It's going to publish to the server again. So now what it does is it takes the name of the survey, so an individual survey ID. Now I have a column header for each gender, female, male, or other. And in the value, it's going to tell me what score they gave them. So for this ID, I had a male that gave me a score for 10. For this ID, I had gave me a score for 9.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's all the time we got for questions here. There might be one or two that I've missed. I'll scroll through the chat once we're done. And if I've missed anyone, I'll just email directly and loop in Kathleen if there's any specific technical questions or anything.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, but thank you very much, Kathleen. Really appreciate it. Sophie, I'm not sure if you want to maybe speak to this slide.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. So folks, with the follow-up after this event, we're going to be including some links to some upcoming events that you might be interested in. So you'll be able to access all these, including the registration page. I know someone did have a question about Power BI. So on June 3rd, we're actually going to be hosting a very similar webinar, but with Power BI as the output. So you'll be able to get a more in-depth experience to how those two work together. I really appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Kathleen. And again, like Liam mentioned, if we didn't get to any of your questions, feel free to reach out to Liam, Kathleen, or myself, and we'll be sure to get them addressed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.